If any of you out there are 20-year-olds thinking about getting married, I encourage you to wait until you're 24 and decide if you're still into it.
And welcome back to another episode of Exposing Ourselves. I'm Travis Ritchie, and this is episode 10, a very special episode. This is the show where we expose each other to new things. Matt, a big music fan, will assign me one of his favorite albums or playlists to listen to each week, and I, a movie buff, will give him one of my favorite films, and we come together on this podcast to discuss it all. And with me, as always, is my good friend,
Matt Runquist. Hey, on this episode of the podcast, we're going to be talking about the album Transatlanticism from Death Cab for Cutie and the movie The Revenant.
Which, interesting, as our special episode, neither of us have seen before this.
Yeah, I appreciate
and listened to the album.
I appreciate that you gave the original intro, so as not to confuse the people. But yeah, what
did I do different? What have I been doing
No,
differently?
you didn't. You gave like the intro as if I gave one of my favorite albums rather than an album that I've never heard before, because I have never heard the Death Cab for Cutie album.
Oh, you know what? You're right. I actually did that wrong.
No, that's great. I love that because
that is our scripted intro for the show, and you're right. There is a significant difference between our normal format and today's VSE.
BSE, yeah. So, yeah, I had never seen The Revenant nor heard the album Transatlanticism. It's supposed to be Death Cab for Cutie's best album, but I never knew. That's what people say. And I
have not either of them either.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because The Revenant has been on my must-watch list for a while because it was so critically acclaimed when it came out. I think it won Oscars for Best Directing and Best Acting from Leonardo DiCaprio, and cinematography. But there was a interesting debate at the time about whether this was the movie that Leonardo DiCaprio should have won for.
Oh yeah,
and
they always have those debates, but honestly, there's no way to. You can't go back in time and be like, actually, what's eating Gilbert Grape, right?
Exactly.
And so
yes.
you deal with what's in front of you, and we like to think that somehow there's some balance in the universe, but ultimately there is no justice in this world, right? Sometimes three people give great performances and only one award gets given, and sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not really anything that's worthy of a best actor, but you still got to give one. So,
well, and some could say that the justice is in the fact that he did win finally, and there is an idea that sometimes they're giving out the award for a body of work rather than just one thing, which is fine. Ultimately, it's a bunch of people, it's humans voting for humans, so. There is no. It's all.
And nobody has to justify.
Subjective.
It's all subjective, but nobody has to justify their vote. People want to read into why this person or that person voted, a particular way, but ultimately we never know why somebody wins, right? We just get the result. So.
I was just going to say, Matt, subjectively, how was your week?
Oh, subjectively, how was my week? It was a pretty quiet week here, it's Super Bowl Sunday. Neither of us celebrates.
Oh, we are recording this on the Superb Owl Day.
Yeah.
I have no idea who's even playing this game.
I actually know because I have friends that are fans of both teams. So it is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. No, the Bills did that thing they always do where they seem like they're going to be good and then do poorly. Again, a friend is a fan, and so I know things about football teams that I have no interest in.
The Chiefs and the Eagles. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
That seems like an interesting matchup. I mean, just from the names.
Yeah.
Not knowing anything about the teams.
I think the thing that many people have keyed on is that the head coach of the Chiefs was previously the head coach of the Eagles and sort of turned that franchise around.
Oh, there's a little drama.
So there's a little drama
there.
Coach drama there, yeah. Anyways.
I'm a fan of drama, so this could be a movie someday.
You don't listen to this podcast to get football news, which is good.
I know I don't. But so your week was slow and not spent gearing up for the Superb Owl.
No. I wrote a song like I do every week. I worked.
Nice.
Work was pretty intense this week, actually. And so yeah, that's kind of it for me. What did you do, Travis?
I did see you had an interesting prompt on Facebook that you were looking for, and as we've talked about on the podcast, things that we've learned as a society since you and I were learning things.
Next week I was supposed to talk about space, and the thing that popped into my head was, hey, Pluto's not a planet anymore. And when we were kids, we thought Pluto was a planet, and so I started sort of riffing on this idea of like, we learn things, and it's good to be open to learning. I think this is something we've touched on a little bit.
And changing your preconceived notions.
Changing your notions when you're given evidence to the contrary. And so I was just asking people on Facebook for examples. The other big example that I have is, of course, that when we were kids, dinosaurs were lizards. That's what we thought. And then it turns out that birds are dinosaurs, and birds are definitely not lizards. So, and it's totally accepted, right? Like there's no questioning of that. Like everybody's just like, yeah, birds are dinosaurs.
But there was a vigorous debate for a while. It lasted a good 10 or 20 years from the time.
Yeah, but that's nothing in the grand scheme of things, right?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think one of the big ones I gave you that is a very, very suitable for that particular discussion is the idea that animals are tool users.
Right.
Because it was one of the big things that set humans apart from animals was that, humans use tools, and humans, there's so many things that humans do that animals don't.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of those are falling by the wayside. Like, humans experience emotion. And I think as a dog owner, and you too, I think, it's clear. We know that that's patently false.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, I had a busy week. I started on Monday very early we had an early call time, and I have an early one tomorrow too, 5:15 a.m., which is a little ridiculous. But we're being preempted on Tuesday and Wednesday for soccer, I guess, on CBS. So I only have 2 days worth of work this week, and so one of them is going to just be long, I guess. And but last week I was at work, and I had an early start in the day on Monday, and then I usually wrap around 11 a.m., so usually I get off pretty early. And I got an email from my agent, this email that says, urgent audition. It's due at 2 p.m. And this was it's at 10:15. I get off at 11, and I'm like, okay, I got 3 hours to do this thing. And it was 7 pages long. It was a 4 scenes that I had to, familiarize myself with. And I had to find a place to shoot, a reader to read with me, and all those things, and kind of prep it so that it was decent, right? And so I did all that. And so I responded to my agent. I said, hey, I see it's urgent. I'll get to it as soon as I can. And they called me back right away and were like, hey, we see you already replied. Just to let you know, don't kill yourself getting it in by 2. You've got a little bit of leeway. So I ended up getting it in by 3, and I'm really happy with it. I think it was really good. And on Tuesday, my agent called me and said, casting loves your tape. They just want to confirm your availability for like 5 months. It's for it's for a TV show. It'd be like a recurring guest star. Can't say what it is, but it's. I mean, I feel like I'll hear very soon if I got it. So
that's
definitely
exciting.
By next week I'll know.
That's exciting news.
One way or another.
You can't say what it is, but it's the Alf reboot.
Oh my God! Are they doing an Alf reboot? Because I would give my left nut to be in that.
I was joking. I was trying to think of something that was extremely unlikely because I didn't want to accidentally touch on the right thing.
Sure. Yeah. No. It is not that, but there definitely should be that. I think an Alf reboot is 100% something we need in the world.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we get into it?
Let's get into it, man. I am excited about this episode.
We have been so good about switching back and forth that there is no usual way we do this. Would you like to do music?
We can just say, let's switch things up a bit.
Music?
And just choose
Let's switch things up a bit and not do anything. No. Would you like to do the movie, The Revenant, or the album?
Well, I would like to do the album first because I feel like, once again, I have less to say about it, and I'm very curious about what you have to say. And I think, by the way, I was thinking about making a prediction, and I would be curious to see if you want to make a prediction about my tastes. But I think you're going to like the album and like the movie.
Okay, that's interesting.
Okay, that's my prediction.
I think you're going to like the movie. And I think you're going to be approximately Haim level on the album. You're gonna basically think this is like male Haim. That's my prediction.
You know, it's funny. So we're going to talk about the music first. I once again had my tribulations with the YouTube music autoplay.
Yeah.
And so I was on my hike when I listened to it the first time through, and it reached the last song and then autoplayed something new. The next song it played was from the Decemberists.
Well, so YouTube Music does do this thing where it plays music that you've been listening to over and over again, and because you listen to so little music, it is going to start sprinkling in the old
It's thinking
playlists.
that I really love all these
Let
things.
Let me ask you that the Decemberist song that you heard, were you like, oh, actually I dig this more, or was it still like,
yes,
oh,
yes I did. And I don't think it was maybe one of the ones I'd listened to before. I think it was just an unrelated or a Decemberist song that was maybe related to what we were listening to. But I did think, I was listening to it and I was like, oh, wow, I'm digging this more than what I've been listening to for the last hour. It can't be the same thing. And so I pulled out my phone and looked. I was like, oh, shoot, yes.
Yeah.
Autoplay.
Well, that's fair.
Okay. So
all right. So
you talk about it first.
Death Cab for Cutie is a band out of the Pacific Northwest. I don't know if they're Oregon or Washington, but honestly, Washington. Okay. So I am a huge indie rock fan. I love a bunch of the bands that came out of the Pacific Northwest in the late 90s. But for some reason, I never got into Death Cab for Cutie. Sorry, go ahead.
Ever? Okay, so not any of their stuff. But I was also going to ask you, what are the couple of the other bands that kind of that?
So Modest Mouse, Built to Spill, the Decemberists, other bands that people who are fans of this style of music would know and consider sort of related. And but I never got into this band. But in 2003, they had sort of a breakthrough album, and it is still considered their best. It's called Transatlanticism. And the only track off this album that I had ever heard is a song called The Sound of Settling, which was their big single off the album.
I kind of thought you were already a Death Cab for Cutie fan.
No.
And just this album had escaped you somehow, but you would not really experience that.
No,
okay.
I was not.
I love this.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard Death Cab is played on like indie music stations, and so there are probably 3 or 4 Death Cab songs that I've heard, a dozen times, but nothing, no whole albums, never been like a fan of them. So, yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So what did you think of this particular album?
So this is a very good demonstration of the principle that we've talked about many times, which is that you need to listen to things more than once. Because when I listened to this the first time, I really dug The Sound of Settling and kind of couldn't care less about the rest of the album. Like if I had to rate it after that first listen, I would have given it a 6. I would have been like, this is nice, it's pleasant, it's fine, but I don't really dig it. But like we've talked about, I listened to it again and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm starting to, because this is very quiet music and it's sort of delicate. You do need to kind of listen into this. If you just let this wash into the background, the album will be over before you know it, and you'll be like, oh, what did I missed it, right? So I did get a closer listen, and I enjoyed it a little more. And if I was rating it after listening to it a second time, I would give it a 7. Like this is better. I'm beginning to see what it is that people enjoy about this. But I'm going to tell you, Travis, I listened to the album a third time.
Did you really?
I did, yeah. Well, again, I'm the music head, so it's not surprising that I would really go for it, especially because I wanted to, it was so kind of generic the first couple of times that I listened to it. I wanted to get at, like, what is it that people are latching onto about this album and saying, oh, this is the best one, right? And so I listened to it a third time, and I gotta say, I really started liking it even more. I would not say I love this album yet, but I could see myself loving this album. Like, I will put this album on again and try to get a little more into it. But I would say, well, okay, not to put the cart before the horse, but now that I've listened to it a third time, I would say my rating has increased again. That's a little teaser for later.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I love that, and I will say I just did a little bit of a search on Metacritic, and Transatlanticism is their highest rated Metascore, I guess, on that as far as albums go, and so you're right about that. There are a couple others that are pretty up there, but I listened to it twice, and I had the same experience. My first time was on a hike, and I felt it was fairly mediocre, I guess. Like, it was fine. It was fine, and which I say that a lot about things. But I think one of the things that if I'm going to articulate a little bit deeper, I think that it was lyrics first. Like, they're very like poetry first, and I felt like the melodies and instrumental, maybe the instrumental, but definitely the singing came second and wasn't all that great. And I did like that you could understand the words. I have a thing for that.
I do know that.
But I also didn't find the lyrics particularly interesting. They kind of felt like, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, like, kind of...
They're like emo
songs.
They're like emo with, like, clean guitar, which maybe doesn't mean anything to you, but so...
I get it exactly.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I get exactly what you're saying, and yes, you're absolutely right. And I think ultimately it's not my type of music. So I listened to it for a second time today, and I kind of sat and listened to it for a little bit while I had some downtime while we were rehearsing other people's sketches, and I kind of was listening to it just to try to give it a more attention, and kind of came to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
It was fine. I think it's almost a much better album to have on in the background. Like, it felt very safe and of a mood.
There's
and
never
not
going to be
a bad mood.
There's never going to be a train whistle that hurts your ears and takes you out of the moment. This is
Thank you. Good memory. Yes. Yeah. And the guy's voice, although I don't think he's much of a singer, is fine. He was okay. I didn't dislike his voice at all, and it didn't hurt my ears to listen to him. I don't think he's a great singer. I think he's probably a songwriter who also sings.
Yeah, I get the sense that he knows his lane, right? And the more Death Cab for Cutie you listen to, the more you hear, like, this sort of the same intervals and the same, oh, that's the high note that he can hit, and because he doesn't really have a whole lot of range to, like, vary his delivery a lot. He's definitely one of those singer who relies on his tricks.
Yeah, I will say you brought up the song. "The Sound of Settling," which is a fine song, but it took until halfway through my second listen to realize that it wasn't "The Sound of Celery." because some of the lyrics are like, I have a hunger twisting my stomach into knots. And I was like, okay, this is about celery. It made sense to me. And I was then looking at the song list and happened to see that it said Sound of Settling. And I was like, oh. Okay.
Yeah, that's
makes less sense now, but also more
of,
sense at the same time.
That's not the sound of celery. No. Lyrically, it's a very restrained album, and it's definitely, I don't know if all of Death Cab is like this, but I suspect it. There's a lot of restrained longing, right? I did not read through the lyrics of Transatlanticism, but it appeared to be about a long distance relationship, and that I guess makes sense with transatlantic. And you've been in long distance relationships or relationships where the partner is on the other side of the world for an extended period of time, and there is this sort of theme of longing and wishing and hoping, and there are times when you just kind of want to smack this guy and be like, get be a hero, be the character, right? Stop being the sidekick in your own life and do something, man. Right? It's super emo, and just it wasn't on this playlist, but I've mentioned the song to you before. Their most popular song is a song called I Will Follow You Into the Dark. And It's a gorgeous song. Beautiful, beautiful song. And it's got this really great line about if heaven and hell decide that they're full and there's no vacancy, we'll go together into the dark. It's all a big metaphor, but the metaphor is, if you die, I will die too, and we'll go into eternity together, which is so emo it hurts, right? You're not going to die when your partner dies unless you're in a car crash together or something, right? It's going to feel like you want to die, but that's not the same thing. And equating them for a bunch of
older people, older couples.
But Ben Gibbard's 40, right? That's not.
Yes, yes. You're too young to be singing.
You're too young to be
that
singing. Yeah, if this is from the perspective of a 95-year-old singing to his 97-year-old wife, okay, then I get that, but I don't think that's what it is. But I guess I'm just sort of referencing the idea that all of this is very. It's funny, right? Because we read Carly Rae Jepsen for being teenagery, and this is also teenagery, just in a different way.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do remember those days when life felt so deep. There is a perspective we've gotten as we've gotten a little older, and I think that perspective might be nothing matters as much as you think it does.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Everything feels like it matters so much.
Yeah, you're never going to feel anything stronger than you do when you're 16 to 24. That's as strong as you ever feel anything in your entire life.
Yeah, that's true. Wow.
And for those of you who don't know, I got married for the first time at the age of 20, so right smack dab in the middle of that. If any of you out there are 20-year-olds thinking about getting married, I encourage you to wait until you're 24 and decide if you're still into it.
Yeah. Well, do you know that's interesting? I was reading a statistic recently about that, where they're saying that millennials are getting married at a later age, and marriages are more successful now than they have been recently.
Yeah.
Because
I think I had read something about that too. It's funny because the marriage age has been getting older for a long time, although from our perspective, that's because marriages were so young back in the day, right?
I know, right?
When we were growing up, there were still a ton of states that allowed marriage at the age of 14 with parental consent, right? And now that seems insane, right? Legitimately crazy, right?
Well, and I don't know when your grandparents got married, but mine were married probably in their 18, 19, 20, 21 range.
Yeah, almost all the people back then were married at least the first time in that range. Yeah.
Wow. Well, so do you have a rating for this? You said 7 is where you...
Yeah, so 7 was where I was after the second listen. I enjoyed it significantly more on the third listen. I am going to listen to this album again, and I'm going to probably always be irritated by the content of the lyrics, but I do enjoy the music quite a lot, and I'm going to give it an 8 now. Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Listening to it 3 times gave me, like, each time I listened to it, I enjoyed it more.
Wow. Okay. So I think, my appreciation did not increase like that. I think if this were on, if I had a partner, for instance, who loved this album and wanted to put it on a Sunday and just have it playing around the house, I would have no problem with that at all. I would absolutely be fine with it, and maybe over time learn to really appreciate it. I think, though, that this is not an album I will probably listen to again unprompted.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you have gotten me into a music listening habit in these past couple months where the other day I wanted to take a shower or something. I had something going on, or I was doing laundry in a shower. I had a bunch of adulting to do. And so I put on an album and I was like, what album? And I think I just went into my music and chose Graceland.
Oh, nice. Excellent choice.
And it's such a good album.
Yeah.
It's just great.
It is one of my top 5
different.
albums.
The lyrics are interesting. The music is great.
Yeah.
And I think, though, that sets a bar.
Yeah.
That this album doesn't reach. And so I am going to give this... I don't know. I don't remember what I gave Haim, but I'm going to put this right in the middle of the road and give it a 5.
Yeah. You also gave Haim a 5. Yep.
Yeah, not surprising. I think I liked this better than Haim.
Yeah.
Because especially, well, so maybe I should give this a 6. No, I think a 5. I think in retrospect I might have rated Haim a 4 if given the opportunity again, because there was stuff I disliked about listening to that album. This has nothing I disliked.
Yeah.
I want to say that.
Okay.
But just nothing I really loved.
Sure. I think a 5 is... I'll be honest, I think a 5 is exactly what I expected. Like, the first time I listened to it, I was like, I'm going to give this a 6. Travis is going to give it a 5. We're going to be bing, bang, boom, But I did really spend some time with it because I was curious, right? This is one of those albums that has sort of hung over me and been like, oh, man, you've never listened to that, right? And so I listened to it, and I was like, why do people... What am I missing, right?
When did this come out? This
2003.
Was 2003.
Yeah,
okay,
so it's 20 years old this year.
I might have to find a song that is about, or a movie that's about 20 years old for our next very special episode. But
all right,
let's talk about the movie that we did watch.
Yeah, let's do it. Tell me what you made me watch.
All right, so I made you watch The Revenant, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and also a couple of other interesting people that this had in it. It had Tom Hardy, who is he's well known for being eclectic in his roles and very kind of, he feels like a stereotypical method actor, but I don't know if he is method or not. Domhnall Gleeson is in it, who is British, but he was playing a American, I guess, military person. Will Poulter is a young man, and I only recognized him because he was in the Game of Thrones series. He was one of the people that helped take Bran to the over the wall, and. Did you ever watch Game of Thrones? You're giving me this look.
First season or 2, but not really.
Oh, okay, that's fine. It ended badly, so I won't hold that against you. Anyway, but it was directed by a guy by the name of Alejandro Iñárritu, who won the Best Director award for this one. And I'm not sure, but I think this movie might have broken him, because he has not directed anything since. This was a 2015 movie, and he has not done. He did a series of well-known movies before this. He directed Birdman. I don't know if you remembered that one, but he has not done anything.
Well,
since as far as a feature film.
I was looking at his Wikipedia as part of my prep for this, and so a couple of things. One, his debut movie was Amores Perros, which I actually saw in the theater because this is back when I was watching movies really regularly. Amazing film. I never want to see it again. It's brutal. It's a hard watch, but it's good, right? And so I was like, oh, this is the Amores Perros guy. But if you look at his, I think he's got, 6 films between 2003 and 2015? Something like that. Yeah,
he also did Babel, which was a big a critical favorite back in 2006, I want to say.
Yeah.
And then Birdman, which was also very well received, and I liked Birdman too.
Yeah.
So this movie came out in 2015. It was, I don't know, got a lot of attention, and I think for me, we talked a little bit about last week about how I don't like Jack Black, but I end up liking everything that he does, and I kind of have the same thing about Leonardo DiCaprio.
Really?
And I'm not sure if it's him or if it's his. He always does a lot of acting in movies.
Yeah.
He likes to act. He likes to push himself and really challenge himself. Tom Hardy does too. And so I feel like watching his movies feels like it's a little bit of work.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
And I haven't liked a couple. Like I really didn't like Wolf of Wall Street, and that got a lot of positive attention. I didn't like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and that got a lot of positive attention. And so I think I let this movie slip under the radar and just kind of like, I'll watch it someday. And which is one of the reasons I wanted to revisit it in this particular context, because this seemed a perfect thing for something that was well known. Everybody seemed to like it.
Happy to help, Travis. Happy to help.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks.
So tell us what you thought, since I had to go first on the music.
Yeah. So it's okay. In short, it's a revenge story, and I don't really know if I love it. And there are a couple things that I specifically don't like, and it had to do with the cinematography. They use a wide-angle lens.
Yes, the close-ups.
They use a wide-angle lens for the majority of this, and a couple of the things that they do. It makes the human eye is closest to about a 50 to 55 millimeter lens if you're ever doing photography, and so if you want to match what you're seeing. It's the reason when you take a picture on your phone, which has a wide angle lens, everything looks so different than what you actually see. It's hard to capture what you see in real life unless you use like a 3x zoom on your phone. That's about a lens that will approximate what you're seeing with your eye. This movie uses what I'm guessing is probably a 35 millimeter lens the whole time, which just makes everything a bit too wide and not look real. And what's more is they use it to get super close to people, so close at times that their breath fogs the lens.
Yes.
And immediately you're taken out of the movie because no longer is it a story of someone who is alone in the wilderness. It's someone who is alone in a wilderness with a camera crew.
Yeah.
And
don't get me started on the last scene, on the fight scene where the blood is splashing on the camera.
Yeah, and the blood splashes on the camera, and they did that thing, which is a common thing for like action movies. Like I think Saving Private Ryan did it, but it worked there in a way that it doesn't work here. And I am kind of flabbergasted by the decision to do that and use those shots.
Yeah, I am 100% on board with you here. So not to cut in, but
yes, please take over.
Well, so here's the thing about this movie. This is, if you made a list of things that I don't particularly want to see, there are a ton of things in this movie that are on that list. I don't love handheld camera. Like, it just, it's supposed to make you feel like you're part of the action or something, but it just makes me feel like that they didn't try very hard, like. And yes, the cinematography with the extreme close-ups with the wide-angle lens are jarring and weird sometimes. I mean, is it very impressive that you're doing these like long takes where there's 360 degrees of motion and it's clearly just Leonardo DiCaprio and a cameraman like swirling around? Absolutely, like technically very impressive, but like I feel like I'm gonna puke, and I don't feel like it's helping tell the story. I feel it almost feels like Inarritu showing off, like, look what I can do, rather than like serving the story, which is, the story is like old, right? It's like a 200-year-old story. Like I was, Amy was I was talking to my wife about this, and she had heard a podcast about, because this is a real person. These are real events. Yeah. She had heard a podcast about this guy back in the day. And so we were able to look up some facts about it, and like feels like a weird choice to sort of Fight Club the movie, I guess, everything is extremely visceral. Like, man, people's hand gets chopped off, and it gets chopped off right there on the camera. There's no smash cut away. There's nothing. It's so visceral. Like here's the thing. I can absolutely see why people love this movie, because there is, like, it's very immediate. It's very visceral. It's extremely brutal. It's extremely violent. And some people really dig on that. That is not my jam at all.
Yeah. I will say that some of that in the service of putting us in that world is interesting. Like, to say, okay, the early 1800s in American West were a brutal place to be alive, and it was hard to make life work and, all that. Okay, great. But then mixed with this style of filmmaking that takes you completely out of that being real. And to your point of it, like showing off, I felt like everybody involved was kind of showing off. Like Tom Hardy and Leonardo DiCaprio were just acting their asses off on this movie, and I believed them. Like, none of it was unbelievable to me, but just it all felt just a little too much for my taste.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to like gather my thoughts about this in a way that doesn't sound like me whining, right? But because like I can appreciate this movie as an achievement while simultaneously hating it, right?
Yeah, and I didn't hate it. I will say that. I'm kind of a little bit higher than you are, and I'm ragging on it for sure. But
I did not love Leo's performance in this. It was fine, right? It's very like, I'm stoic, staring into the middle distance. I know things. I've experienced things. You can tell by staring into.
I'm eating a raw fish, and I'm probably doing it for real.
Oh my God, the raw fish scene. Yeah, let's talk about on a list of things that I don't need to see. I don't need to see Leonardo DiCaprio catch a fish with his bare hands and eat it live on screen. Like, it's just not a thing that I need to see. Like, I understand that this situation is difficult, right? And good for him for finding a source of food, right? Like, he's a clever dude who knows how to survive in the wild, right?
He's a survivalist.
But that scene, I didn't need that scene to know that.
I mean, that's not the scene that really... I mean, the scene that got me was the Empire Strikes Back Hoth recreation with the Tauntaun.
Yeah. And there was a moment there where I was like, are they going to really do this? Like, they're just going to straight up steal Empire Strikes Back? Like, they're not even going to... No, it was I mean, with the knife going across and the innards spilling out and everything. Like, it was the exact same scene. I was like, am I supposed to laugh at this? Like, I felt like I was supposed to, like Like, look at you referencing this 1977 or 1980
yeah, I don't know.
like science fiction film. Like, what a weird choice that was. Like,
yeah. And the fact that there wasn't like as gory as they were for the rest of the.
Was there?
It seems like there was a lack of blood in that scene, considering how gory they were in the rest of the episode.
I just like I don't know what I learned from like.
He sleeps inside a horse. For those of you who haven't seen the movie,
he sleeps inside of
a horse dies, and it's cold out.
Well, let's be honest. He rides a horse off a cliff. Like, he kills the horse.
He rides this horse off a cliff.
Okay.
Yes.
Like,
unintentionally, he's fleeing for his life.
Sure, he's fleeing for his life. But here's the thing: why is this? This is a 2.5+ hour movie. Like, just the horse goes. You see the knife. You see the horse. Like, this does not need to be a 3-minute long scene where you watch him cut the horse open.
We could have just seen him wake up inside the horse.
Yeah, and then slide inside the horse, and then you get the reverse scene. Then you see him like chipping his way out of the icy horse. Like,
yeah, that would have been interesting. Sure,
it's so egregious, right?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, and I'm normally not squeamish about stuff like that, but So the other thing that got me a little bit wrong on this was that I think that they didn't have a sense of time, and so I've broken bones. I've broken ribs. I've broken a wrist, and the way he broke his ankle, is not something you would be walking normally.
You know what that is? It's the misery break. What? That's the misery break.
For sure,
right?
And there's a scene, I want to say 2/3 of the way through the movie. In fact, just before the horse off the cliff scene, he is sleeping and he gets beset on by the Indians, and he sprints to the horse. Maybe only 5-6 steps.
Yeah,
but it's a full-on run.
He's not hobbling.
And he gets there. He's not hobbling. Yeah. So anyway, stuff like that. It just seemed unreal to me. And we gotta rate this movie.
Oh man. Okay, so I definitely, here's the thing. I personally give this movie a 3, right?
Okay.
But I understand what an achievement this is, and that this movie is not for me. Like, this is not my bag. On that
good.
front,
I'm kind of glad to hear that, because okay, good.
And on that front, I would give it a 7. I would say this is a really solid, well done movie that just made some choices that I wouldn't make and told the story well, but in a way that I wouldn't tell it. Right. So I would average those together, and my rating is a 5. Then that's my final rating. I took inspiration from you actually on that, because of your Godspeed thing last week.
Yeah, well, what's funny is I think I'm going to do another first for the podcast. I'm going to rate it a 5 as well.
Oh wow!
Which is
really?
The first episode where I've rated the music and the movie the same, and because the same thing. I see where it's fine. I didn't love really anything about it. I was a little upset that Domhnall Gleeson, got to play an American. What can you not find? And why are you not angry about British people playing Americans? I thought that would be one of your things. And like classic Americans, right? And they have this Brit playing him, and I love Domhnall Gleeson. I think he's handsome and a very good actor. But I didn't need to see him in this. I would have rather seen, me or someone like me. Anyway, this movie was a success, by the way. The budget was $135 million, and I guess I can see it. They did, I think, try to do very good work with representing Indian tribes and accurately and that kind of thing. I started watching a documentary on it and couldn't get through it. So, but it made $533 million in the box office, so it made a profit.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, it's Academy Award. I think it was notable for having the director win the Oscar, but not winning the Oscar itself.
Oh yeah, that's kind unusual.
Yeah. So a 5 from me as well. 5s from both of us. Not same ratings for the movie, and for me, same ratings for movie and song. That's or an album. Well, what do you got for us next week?
So you are familiar with very popular 80s and 90s band REM, right?
Oh, yes,
yeah,
of course.
Shiny Happy People, and It's the End of the World as we know it, and Everybody Hurts, all that good stuff. But, so REM signed a contract with Warner Brothers for $100 million for 5 albums, and every single one of those albums did not do particularly well. But the first one of those albums was called New Adventures in Hi-Fi, and it is, I think, REM's best album. So
wow.
I am going to have you listen to New Adventures in Hi-Fi by REM.
Wow. Okay. And when does this album, when did it come out?
I want to say 98, somewhere in the late 90s.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yep. I've already...
and we're going to have to...
Oh, go ahead.
No, you said what?
I've already dropped the link for you in the podcast chat. 1996 is when it came out.
Surely you've seen Fight Club, right?
I have.
Did you see Inception?
No.
Interesting. Oh, okay. This is related. Okay, great. Okay, well, I do have an interesting related movie that I want to give you. It's related because it does star Leonardo DiCaprio and is maybe one of the last movies that I've actually liked him in. And this is a movie that is also very well received. A completely different director. This is a director that you know. It's Christopher Nolan.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's not a movie. It's not a director that you love because you didn't like The Prestige. Yeah. But I'm going to have you watch and tell me what you think of Inception.
This is the Dark Knight guy too, right?
This is the Dark Knight guy,
yeah.
yes.
Oh, man.
And so the thing that's interesting about Inception is that it is, and the reason I want you to watch it is because it is a cultural touchstone. This is a movie that is referenced in so many things. The idea of a movie within a movie within a movie, you know, is something that is you'll see a lot. And so it's got a great cast. Again, Tom Hardy is also in this. And so the pair of them together is going to contrast with what we've just experienced with The Revenant. And I want you to put The Revenant behind you. Just empty it from your brain.
I would also like to put The Revenant behind me. Yeah.
Yes. I do like Inception, and I'll tell you that ahead of time. So it's something that is possible to enjoy. But, you know, I also like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I love in just about everything. So
yeah.
Have you seen a lot of his movies?
500 Days of Summer.
Is that it? Have you seen Brick or Looper?
No.
Oh man, we're gonna have some fun. Okay, I'm gonna set up a list because I was worried about not having movies to make you watch without being able to have you watch a superhero movie, and so I think that this is gonna be a good way to kind of like get in here with a new flow.
All right.
So yeah, Inception.
Okay, Inception it is.
Whew.
Wow, Travis. Well, thank you for exposing yourself to me this week.
Thank you for exposing yourself to me on this very special episode.
All right, cool. Have a good one. See you all next time.
Talk to you next week.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.